So, I like learning languages, or rather, that is to say, learning about different languages. And an interesting point of the languages I've come across are names. But something I've noticed that no one seems to talk about is how we use names, at least for English. There are plenty of descriptions about the origins and meanings of names, but almost no one talks about how we call different people different things depending on the context. And so I'm just gonna ramble about how it works, okay? Cool. Now, why don't we start off by talking about what the basic components of names are? English names are primarily made out of two components. The first being a name given by the parents, called a given name, and alternatively called a first name, forename, or, if given during a baby dunking ceremony, a Christian name. The other is the name that's passed down through the family, usually through the father's line, called the surname, or the last name, or the family name, or the genteel name. Ooh, fancy. There's also an optional third name called a middle name that goes between the first and last names. Go figure. Though it usually gets regulated to a single letter at the end of the real name. There aren't any rules about what a middle name should be, and most people don't really share it all that often, so you could put anything there and nobody would care. But typically, people use the middle name to honor a family member, like a grandparent or something. Now, to other languages, having 2.5 names might seem excessive, but it's nothing compared to some languages where you have your first name, your given name, and then between those, the name of both your parents, your godparents, the town you were born in, the job you have, the job you wish you had, your social security number, and a reference to something only 9 people know of. Most of the time in English, people address each other with their given names, because English speakers are super cash. However, if you want to create distance between you and whomever you're talking to, then you tend to use last names. That distance can be a form of respect, usually used with an honorific of some sort, or as a jocular way to keep someone beneath you socially. If a person marries and decides to take their spouse's surname, then the original surname becomes known as the maiden name. Now, for celebrities, just using one of the names isn't enough. No, you gotta use the full thing. Nobody is going to say, "Oh, I just love Freeman's voice." Or, "Did you see that new Charlie TikTok?" Unless they're simultaneously famous enough and their name is unique enough.
The names of the 4 pilots who were on board the flight.
Like Picasso or Kubrick. Then it's both names or no names. In addition to these main names, people can also adopt alternate names. The most well-known and commonly used are nicknames or monikers, which are often shortened variations of one's given name that is often bestowed by friends or family. These can also be based on a quality the person portrays, which are more likely to be given by schoolyard bullies, or a humorous incident where you just had to have been there, bro. I was there. It's my nickname and I still don't know why you call me Rubber Ducky. While you can, in theory, choose your nickname, ultimately the power lies with other people and how they choose to address you. Even more out of your control are pet names, which are typically associated with lovers with names like darling, honey, baby, and schnookums, but also tend to be used by close friends with names like bro, dude, homie, and schnookums. But this doesn't mean there isn't a type of name you can have full control over, as you can give yourself a pseudonym, which is Greek for fake name, also known as pen name or Alan Smithy, named after the Greek philosopher who invented pseudonyms. But the pseudonym variation you're probably most used to is known as a username. That's because a pseudonym is a name that one uses to remain anonymous. Some people, such as royalty or the heads of powerful religious organizations, take up new names when they are sworn in. For instance, you might be born as a John, but when you become king, your name is now John, and you just have to deal with it. These are known as regnal names for royalty and monastic names for religious royalty. Speaking of royalty, have you ever read a fantasy novel and come across a name like Craig the Golden, Slayer of Dragons, Haver of Sex, Eater of Fine Cheeses? What's with all those descriptions after his name? Well, my friend, those are titles. Titles work a lot like nicknames, except instead of replacing someone's name, they are appended onto the name, like how I just appended a hand onto your face while you were unconscious. Titles aren't the only things that get added to a name. The most common additions are honorifics, which are words meant to convey a sense of respect and tend to be used with the surname only. Usually these names come in the form of Mr., abbreviated Mr for men, and Miss and Mrs., abbreviated Ms and Mrs for unmarried and married women respectively. Why do we differentiate marital status for women and not for men? That's not a rhetorical question. This has always confused and bothered me. These honorifics are almost exclusively used by children addressing a teacher or another child's parent. However, these are not the only honorifics, just the ones that come to most people's minds. English has a whole bunch of honorifics that you probably don't even think about. Sometimes they can be based on someone's profession, status, or accomplishments. For instance, if a person studies hard enough to be acknowledged as a learned scholar, then they received the doctor or der honorific. If a person is rich enough to employ a butler or maid, they may be called Master X or Lady Y. Or, if you're born as royalty, you may be called Lord, Lady, Duke, Duchess, Prince, Princess, Queen, King, Emperor, or Emperor's Concubine. Or my personal favorite, Earl. 'Cause that's just a normal name these days. And then there's a whole host of professions that people use as honorifics, like coach, captain, rabbi, though most are used for political or military personnel, such as senator, president, prime minister, mayor, major, general, lieutenant, lieutenant, you get the idea. What if you have a child and, very uncreatively, decide to name that child after yourself? How are people supposed to differentiate between these two Mildreds? Well, you can call the younger Mildred Mildred Junior, or Jr., and the older Mildred, Mildred Senior, or Senor. Okay, but what if Mildred Junior has a child and she names him Mildred? Does the previous Junior become Mildred Jr. Sir, and the latest model become Mildred Jr.? At this point, people just end up numbering the children. Mildred the Third, Mildred the Fourth, Mildred the Fifth, The Empire Strikes Back. And that's the end. Did I miss anything? I mean, yeah, probably, but what are you gonna do about it? Correct me down in the comments. I'd like to see you try.